Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's FBC Radio Live, Thursday, May the 4th. And no, I'm not going to make some Star Wars joke, but I guess I just inadvertently brought it up that, people like to celebrate today as Star Wars Day, John. Look, I love the originals. I think some of the content that's come out recently, I just can't keep up with it, to be honest with you, John. Like, it used to be so simple. It just used to be the three movies, great story, one of the greatest trilogies of all time. And now I can't even keep up with the lore. I don't understand half of it. I have no idea what I'm watching. I know good friend Michael Cratty could sit here and give me a lesson on everything Star Wars and kind of the intricacies of it. But John, quite frankly, I'm just, I'll celebrate by maybe watching one of the originals today. Maybe I'll do that. That's after I go see Guardians of the Galaxy.
True. Yeah, that seems like you got a pretty exciting day planned. I saw the original Star Wars 25 years after its release. Like, I'm a movie buff, but that's not a genre that I'm really into.
Mm-hmm.
And Star Wars felt more like a Western in outer space.
Oh.
I didn't really even see the other ones. I mean, my favorite, and I don't even sci-fi film, it's more myth, and it's an epic film, which is just a treat, which is 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is a very, very polarizing film, which 10% of the people that have seen it absolutely love it, put it in their top 5, their top 10, which is I'm one of that 10%. And then like 90% don't get it or hate it or fell asleep during it. So it's really a polarizing film, but it's not a genre that I'm really excited to see. But yeah, may the force be with you. I'll say it.
Yeah, I was going to say, so it's kind of like The English Patient, right? Where some people loved it, others hated it, like Elaine.
Right. I'm with Elaine on that one. And I love Ray Fiennes.
Yeah.
One of my favorite actors. Got to see him on Broadway performing Hamlet back in 1995. One of my favorite actors. Quiz Show is awesome. He was incredible. And Schindler's List. But no, not a big fan of The English Patient either. I'm with Elaine on that one.
Yeah, I think we can share that opinion. I am, however, obviously it's the 40-year anniversary of Return of the Jedi this year. And they are releasing it out into some theaters, especially in this area. Well, in this area in particular, I know around the country. So I do think I am going to partake in that eventually, because I've never seen the originals in theater. I mean, obviously, I was a little bit too young. I was born in 1986. So if I had seen the originals when they came out, I'd have a lot of questions to answer. Let's just put it that way. But even so, I believe they did this before, where, whatever it was, the 20-year anniversary or something like that. They probably brought these back, or like when the prequels came out or something like, I don't know. All I know is at some point they had some of these movies come out back into theaters, and I didn't get a chance to. So I think I'm gonna do that at some point. So I should really get on that, because I know it's a limited engagement affair. So yesterday we talked with our good buddy Jim Behringer. We did a lot of hockey talk yesterday, so we didn't really get a chance to talk about the NBA. And good thing we waited, because yesterday we would have talked about the disappointing end to the Celtics game 1 against Philadelphia. But fortunately, we waited a day, and now we're going to talk about the 34-point victory and bounce back that they had last night. Because I don't know if there is really any concern following the game 1 loss. I don't think anyone necessarily expected them to sweep this series. But I think losing that game, and the 76ers being without Joel Embiid, you're kind of like, what's going to happen? Is this Philadelphia? Well, it didn't really matter. Embiid came back. He was really ineffective yesterday. What we have, I'm like, I don't even know. I didn't even check this final stat line.
Yeah, 15 wasn't really a big deal. He
had
3 rebounds, 5 blocks. He was better on defense than he was on offense. He didn't look good. Obviously, he's been out for 2 weeks. He's a huge guy. Just won his first MVP. So, yeah, I mean, it was one of those things, and this is what happens in the NBA. The road team wins game 1 in exciting fashion. Game 2, it's almost like they mail it in, knowing that they got a split on the other team's home court. The Celtics played desperately. They were locked in on defense, played with more force, more poise, and on offense, shared the basketball and got contributions from everybody. Who would think that the Celtics would win by 34 points when Jason Tatum was their 7th leading scorer, only had 7 points in 18 minutes? It speaks to their depth. You obviously want to see Jason Tatum play better than that, but he was in foul trouble
Mhm.
for pretty much the entire game, it felt like. So, yeah, but that's the NBA. That's what you see. And as Danny Ainge said many, many times, it's not the Tour de France. It's one game apiece. Philly won by 4. Celtics won by 34. Now it's a best of 5. Philly has home court advantage. I still like the Celtics in this series. They're a better team. They really, really are. I mean, I think I told you, or I may have told Jet Stryer, my co-host on the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Staff, which you can hear on full press coverage.
Nice plug.
That, yeah, I try my best. I try to be a radio pro. But if you were to draft the players in this series, 7 of the first 11 draftees would be Celtics. And then you go from there. So the Celtics just have a better roster than the Philadelphia 76ers, without question.
Yeah, and I think that was obviously a lot of the confidence going into game 2. And obviously, yeah, there was concern that, oh, no, maybe Embiid comes back and he's his MVP self. But to your point, I mean, they're just the Celtics are just deeper. And when you really look at game 1, that was more of a product of they just truly kicked themselves and tripped up on their own feet. And, throwing the fact that James Harden had his highest playoff point total in 7 years. That's not something that's necessarily sustainable. To be honest, what's more sustainable is the Celtics kicking themselves. I expect that to happen at least a couple more times throughout this postseason. Let's just hope that it's scattered across the couple series, and then they'll be all right. But yeah, it was an encouraging victory. Obviously, last night, your Los Angeles Lakers, though, John, will be looking to go up 2-0 on the Golden State Warriors. I think we talked about it before the series, and it kind of came true in game 1. How do you stop a top of his game Anthony Davis? And I don't think the Warriors can. It's just the question is, John, are you going to get that Anthony Davis entire series? And is there anything Golden State can do to kind of counteract that?
I guess if you can get him for 4 games, that'll be enough because you'll win those 4 games. And look, Anthony Davis, even in the first series against Memphis, was inconsistent. He'd have a 34-point game followed by a 13-point game, followed by a 29-point game, followed by an 11-point game. He's inconsistent when it comes to scoring. He always rebounds. That's never an issue. And he always plays defense. I mean, he has double the blocks of any other player in the postseason so far. He's an elite defensive player. LeBron's kind of filled in the gaps, scoring, rebounding, passing, doing what he always does. And then the other players, 2 or 3 of them step up in a given game. They're going to be tough to beat. But, yeah, I think it's a tough matchup for Golden State. Anthony Davis is locked in. He's healthy. And I think this is one of the scenarios that could happen is the Lakers win the championship, which would be LeBron's 5th, 1 less than Michael Jordan. So the argument gets even more juicy at that point. But what could happen is Anthony Davis is the finals MVP because he's that good. And Skip Bayless's head explodes at that point because he'll talk about that LeBron needed Anthony Davis to carry him. He needed help. Jordan never needed help, although, remember John Paxson and Steve Kerr hitting big shots in finals games on multiple occasions. But, Skip sometimes was in a dreamland. But, yeah, Anthony Davis, he's that good. He's really that good. Now, the issue could be that there's only a day between game 1 and game 2. So, what kind of Anthony Davis are you going to get tonight? That's a big question mark.
Yeah, again, I mean, that's easy if you just knew, right? Just like, oh, okay, all right,
Yeah,
we're gonna get
right?
all-star,
Wager on
superstar Anthony Davis. Okay, all right, let's just wrap it up. We'll go back.
Yep.
Golden State will be down 2-0 again, and we'll just go from there. And look, I mean, it's definitely possible. And as I said this to someone else, like I just can't write off Golden State. You know what I mean? Like, and mostly Steph Curry. Like, that's really what it is. It's like I can't write off Steph Curry, and that's that's kind of the biggest obstacle in sitting here and having a good opportunity. You kind of got the Golden State on its heels. We saw Sacramento wasn't able to finish the job, and look, there's a lot of. Look, Sacramento was young. They were just getting in for the first time in a million years. This Lakers team just won an NBA championship not too long ago, not to mention, obviously, LeBron and company. This team should be able to close out a series that they, if they go up to nothing, they should be able to close it out against Golden State. And I believe, John, is it 19 straight series or 18 straight series when the a LeBron team wins like game one, they win the series, something like that. I heard that on SportsCenter this morning. That's something I feel like you would know, or would have like tattooed on your arm or something.
Well, I'm not big on tattoos, but I got poster boards up. I don't want to have the guy who cuts out like the newspaper headlines and is like the serial killer. I don't want to do that either.
No.
We don't want to do that. But with LeBron, normally he gets off to a slow start. Oftentimes they'll lose the first game. It's a feeling out process, and then he goes from there. I mean, remember in 2018 he lost the first 2 games at TD Garden to the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals. Then he won 4 of the next 5, and the Cavaliers moved on to the NBA Finals. Yeah, so he sometimes can be a slow starter in these series and then gear up at that point. The key here for the Lakers is game 1 was in Golden State. If they can somehow steal tonight, they'll be up 2-0 and then go back to LA for games 3 and 4. And I agree with you on Golden State. Doesn't Golden State feel a little bit like the 2018 Patriots? Like they have this championship DNA. Maybe they're not themselves. Maybe they're not overpowering. They didn't have a great regular season, but someone has to knock them off because they're so good, so well coached. Remember that playoff? The Chargers were supposed to beat the Patriots. Well, the Chiefs were supposed to beat them, and so were the Rams. And then Tom Brady's hoisting Lombardi number 6. So you still have that feel that Golden State's never out of it. So the Lakers, and again, we see this in the NBA. You win game 1 on the road, you lay down game 2. You don't want to do that because when you steal back home court advantage, that's great, but that means you still have to win all your home games.
Right.
That's not a guarantee in the postseason. We've seen the Celtics play essentially 500 basketball the last 2 years at home. And the Lakers can lose at home. There's no question about that. Anyone can lose at home. So you got to treat these games as single entities and just try to really take control of the series rather than lay down and let Golden State get back into it. But this is something that the NBA's always had. It's kind of a zigzag theory. You're good in game 1, you're not good in game 2, and now it's a best of 5.
Well, I can tell you this. One team that's really hoping for some home mojo tonight, John. Phoenix Suns. Were we wrong about what we were going to see from the Phoenix? Like, look, there's a lot of reason to get hyped. Going out, Chris Paul, they really haven't looked good against just a much better team. Denver is a better team, but you know what I mean. Like I didn't think they were better. I thought certainly Kevin Durant closed a huge gap, but it's been surprising, really, John, that it's something surprising, and that tells me this is going to be a series that wins tonight, and for all intents and purposes, ends the series, come back 3-0 in the NBA.
Right, and Phoenix has no depth to begin with, and if they don't have Chris Paul tonight, Campaign's going to start at point guard. He's one of your best guys off the bench. DeAndre Ayton has been horrible in this series. Jokic has just toyed with him. Devin Booker has been great. Durant had a horrible game, too. He was 2 of 12 from 3, which I didn't think was physically possible. It'd be like having a playoff game where Tom Brady threw 4 interceptions. Like after the game, you'd say, that possibly didn't happen, did it? Well,
yeah,
in the case of Kevin Durant. It's such an anomaly. Like Kevin Durant, 2 for 12 from 3, that makes no sense. So the problem with Phoenix is they have no depth because to get Durant, they traded essentially half their roster to get him. Kind of like the way the Celtics traded half their roster and draft picks to get Kevin Garnett back in 2007. The difference is that was done in the offseason. So you tweak your roster going forward. When they got Kevin Durant, Phoenix had really no options other than trying to fill the gaps with, marginal players at best.
And to be honest, John, and I think this is because if you go back, you can point to the 2002 Lakers as like quote unquote super team, but that Celtics team was really the one that kind of kickstarted this last 15 years or so, a teaming up team, players get superstars together. And of all the, obviously there's an argument for Miami and everything like that for sure. But that might have been the best cohesion of talent. And I think other teams have been desperately trying to recreate that. So they did that. Those trades did happen, in the offseason, which gave them time. But Garnett, Allen, and Pierce complemented each other so well. I mean, it was like the perfect trio of like each did some, you know what I mean? Each had a very specific role, so to speak, and I think it worked very well. Now, obviously, I think just the sheer talent of LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and then, quote unquote, throw in Chris Bosh, and you can sit there and say, well, obviously that worked, but you remember it didn't work right away. This Celtics team went out and won 66 games, John, right off the bat, and they were just right, boom. They went from having one of the worst seasons in franchise history to that what I can't even remember the number of game turnaround that it was, but it was large. So I think since then, everyone's like, okay, if we, it's like get Chris Paul and Kevin Durant in this, or James Harden, Kyrie Irving in this, and it's like, okay, it's great on paper, but it's not as easy as it seems. And like I said, I mean, the first team to do it, really, in this era of just this generation of basketball. I'm not speaking to whatever in the past. That Celtics team really just found that right cohesion. So, maybe you're right. Maybe if this happened for Phoenix in the offseason and they come back and they're at the same point with the same exact players, maybe they're much better off because they've had Kevin Durant and they've had this entire season to gel and find what works for them. Right now, they're kind of lost and getting desperate.
That Celtics team in 2007 put those three guys together. They also had Rajon Rondo, who was an emerging second-year point guard. Kendrick Perkins was a perfect center for that team. Didn't let he defended. Garnett was such a great defensive player and such a leader. He kind of took control of the locker room. But you also had those three stars at the perfect moment because they'd all had individual accolades. I mean, Garnett had been a league MVP. Pierce and Allen and Garnett all went to multiple All-Stars, and it was like they got together when they were all around 30, 31 years old and said, okay, enough of the individual stuff, let's win. They got off to a great start. Like you said, they won 66 games. Struggled a little bit in the first two rounds. Needed 7 games to beat Atlanta, 7 games to beat Cleveland. The thing with Phoenix is Chris Paul is just so old, and he's just not durable, and Durant's always hurt, and it did happen in midseason. I think the best super team that I've seen since the Bulls in the 90s would be Golden State with Durant, Steph, and Clay. But the difference there was they had already won a championship. So it wasn't like they were coming from nowhere.
Yeah, I'm kind of
lost to the Cavaliers. So that's kind of a different thing, right, than saying what the Celtics did.
I'm talking about more teams trying to put something like Brooklyn. Brooklyn tried to put together a big three or
exactly.
That type of thing. So
getting Durant was like piling on. I mean, they were arguably they won 73 games and then they added Kevin Durant.
Yeah. Well, it's like the Bruins going. It's like the Bruins going out and getting maybe not Connor McDavid, but maybe Leon Draisaitl. Another 50. Which. I'm not quite over the Bruins thing yet. I'm trying. Every so often it just gets me, but no, it's again, it's not easy to win in any sport, but we're seeing that right now with Phoenix, who maybe we just took Denver for granted because it's like, well, it was the 2-time defending NBA MVP. He will not win his third one, but obviously it doesn't matter. It doesn't take away who Jokic is. Then you have, you know what I mean? So then you get the excitement of Kevin Durant and Phoenix, not too long removed from going to the NBA Finals. But to your point, Chris Paul isn't what he was a couple years ago. He is, he's an older guy. You know what I mean? That's what it is. That's the reality of it. And Kevin Durant is fragile. I mean, really at any point. I mean, you could be going into Game 3 tonight, and 20 minutes before tip-off, you could get breaking news that Kevin Durant aggravated an Achilles injury. And
he fell off his chair in the locker room or something strange, right? He got hurt in warm-up a couple of months ago.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, exactly. So it's like, I mean,
layup lines.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. It's like, that's how, talk about hanging on by a thread right now. So, yeah, I look at Denver tonight. I just think they're going to take care of business. I don't think there's going to be much drama in it. It's just going to be kind of cut and dry, wipe your hands clean, move on, and pretty much close it out in 4 or 5. So before we go, though, I mentioned Leon Draisaitl, second player in 2 nights to score 4 for his team, and this is ultimately going to be what sinks their ship if they. can you be so potent offensively? And you look at Vegas, like I like Vegas a lot more talent, but guess what? They won because they know how to win. And it's incredible. We've talked about the parallels Oiler Major League Baseball a few times. I think the difference is that the Oilers have had a moderate amount of success over the last half seasons, whereas the Angels have not. But the reality of it is, John, that there's not much difference between the two because they have two of the best players in the sport on the same team, and they just cannot get out of their own way. And now all of a sudden you had the Oilers. Now, again, they went down in the first round series, but I feel like at this point they're playing with fire. And it's not going to be, let's put it this way. It's not going to be possible for them to go on and win a Stanley Cup playing the way they are, losing games 6-4, giving up 5 goals, being able to score all this and not be able to win. So exciting games to watch. And sorry, Jim, did not work too well for the Devils last night. They did not show up. Let's hope for them it's a repeat of their first round series where they go down 0-2 and then just take care of business. But this Oilers team, it's like I think I'd like to see them win. Certainly, they're the only Canadian team I want to see win that's left. I do not want to see Toronto. But I just, looking at this team, I can't get past the lack of defense and the lack of, the ability to do anything but score. So
when teams have had like arguably the two best players in the sport, which obviously we can make a case for McDavid, certainly the greatest player in hockey by far, and Dreisaitl's, not too far behind. But when Lemieux was with Yager, they won cups, right? When Gretzky was with Messier, they won cups. Now, they didn't play on the same line, Gretzky and Messier, because they were both centers. They just had so much talent, it wasn't even fair. I mean, I didn't even mention Yari Curry and Paul Coffey. And, they had like probably, you can make a case that Edmonton team had like 5 of the top 10 players in the world at that point.
Yeah.
Back in the,
easily.
In the 80s. I mean, but Gretzky and Messier were right there with Lemieux as the 3 best players in the sport. And Curry and Coffey and not to mention Grant Fuhr and net, who oftentimes, I remember the Bruins beat the Edmonton Oilers one game. I think it was 5-3. This was the regular season game. He was ridiculous because they didn't even play defense in front of him. Like a normal goalie would have gave up like 15 goals that night. He was that good. I said, guy gave up 5 goals, but he was incredible.
Yeah.
So it was just like they had like half of the top 10 players in the league. So obviously they were going to win. But you have Edmonton with, like you said, the 2 best players in the sport, and we'll see what happens. But is it the structure of the defense, Ian? Is it the talent? What's the story with the goaltending? What is it? Is it the forwards aren't good defensively too to help? I don't know. You know a lot more than I do.
I mean, it's a combination of everything. I mean, obviously, you can't, defensive structure, philosophy, ability, and look. I mean, mediocre goaltending. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, there's not a lot of great goaltenders in this league.
Mm-hmm.
There's some pretty good ones, and you get, there's like maybe like 5 or 6 like truly elite, like you can pretty much count on season. You have players that goalies that come in, have a great season, have a great little stretch here and there, but for the most part, you have a lot of mediocrity in tandems, and I don't mean that insulting. I mean it is what it is. I mean it could be a combination of more open ice, so more goal scoring, that type of thing, but there isn't that many Vasilevskis out there, or you know what I mean, like Marc-Andre Fleury's when he was, during his peak run, or like, some of these other guys. So I think that's a huge disadvantage for a team like Edmonton, who obviously puts a lot into goal scoring, but I mean, their goal scoring isn't a problem. So if they score 4 goals or 5 goals every game, they should win every single game. The problem is they're letting up 5 or letting up 6, and that's the problem. So I think it's a combination of everything. They're not good enough defensive talent wise. I don't think they have the right defensive structure to complement what they do offensively. And then, of course, it comes down to goaltending because, well, if you have a better goaltender, a better situation there, then some of those issues aren't going to be as pronounced.
A difference maker in that, right? And there's just not many of those, like you're saying, right?
Not even like necessarily not necessarily a difference maker, but I don't know. It's hard to explain because, like I said, so many teams are going to this tandem.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's not necessarily it's again, it's the era of a goalie playing 65, 70 games. It's just not going to happen anymore. It's just not how games played. There's no reason to do that, especially if you have aspirations. Lefsky the last couple of years, unless you have aspirations to go on and win a Stanley Cup, it's just not feasible in today's game to have that under your belt before you get to the postseason. So maybe that creates a bit more, I don't know, mediocre play across the board. Like I said, I think this Edmonton team they're very top heavy. Just fortunately for them, that top part is pretty potent, and that's offense, and that means you can win a lot of games in the regular season, especially. But postseason, that's where it really kind of comes into play because you have to do both things very well, and that's on a side note. Last time I'm going to mention the Bruins. That's one of the reasons why it was so shocking what happened to the Bruins because they were really good offensively and defensively. They just forgot how to play defense, and guess what? 65 wins out the table. So that's where Edmonton is. It doesn't mean they can't come back and beat us because this isn't the same Vegas team that went to the Cup final a few years ago. They're still a really good team. Don't get me wrong. But Edmonton can still overpower them with offense. I just feel like to do that for 4 straight rounds, eventually they're not going to be able to score. Eventually they're going to turn into it. They're going to get a stretch where they just can't put the puck in the net consistently. And, that's going to cost them. So maybe it's this round, maybe it's next, maybe it's the Stanley Cup final. I don't know.
You have to win in different fashions in hockey, right? Because you're playing different opponents if you make it to the finals. And the frustrating thing, and I don't want to bring the Bruins up again, but there's so many weird things that happen. They scored 27 goals in that series. They told me before the series the Bruins are going to score 27 goals and they're going to win 2 of 3 in Florida. I go, okay, that's a 6-game series max, right? So obviously because they would have gone to Florida 3 times. Here's the thing. In the third period during the regular season, third period in overtime, they gave up a grand total of 59 goals in 82 games. That's exceptional. In 7 postseason games in the third period in overtime, they gave up 14 goals.
Yeah.
They gave up 2 goals per game in the postseason just in the third period in overtime alone, while in the regular season it was like 3/4 of a goal. I mean, that's where it was. They dominated the third period all year, and then they didn't in the postseason. It's just one of the weird things. You could write a book about that series, and it would be Stephen King could probably write it.
And it just a horror book, really. It just
man.
I can't do it.
Wes Craven could direct it.
And Daniel Day-Lewis could star in it, right? Or is that beneath him? Actually, I don't know if he's that. Who could he play?
Oh, he'd learn how to skate. He'd learn how to skate. He'd be third in the league in scoring on his own. It's like when De Niro trained for Raging Bull,
right?
Like Jake LaMotta was like, I can train this guy to be a top 10 fighter. He's that good, and he's that into the role. Which sometimes it does get.
So he can play Patrice Bergeron, then, right? Is what you're saying?
Probably, yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah,
I think he played Lincoln.
Oh, there you go.
So why not?
About the same impact on culture.
Yeah,
the two
on society.
Yeah, on society, right? Anyways, so tomorrow we'll obviously talk about the Lakers maybe losing, maybe winning. Well, no, we'll see. We'll talk about that tonight or tomorrow. The Suns could possibly be in a 3-0 hole, and of course, if there's any other news, particularly Mercedes Lewis heading to New York to join Aaron Rodgers and the gang with the Jets, we'll talk about that. But until then, have a great Thursday. Have a great day. If you're going to see Guardians of the Galaxy today, enjoy it. I'm going to. So we will talk to you tomorrow. Take care.